Any doubts regarding fibers, fabric, natural fibers, man-made fibers, and man-made fabrics? How to identify them, properties, and underlying fabric. Any doubts regarding all these topics that we discussed so far? Any doubts? Anna, can you please switch on your video? So any doubts? Any doubts? Anyone? No. So what are the properties? What all are the properties of natural fibers and natural fabric? What all are the properties, common characteristics of natural fibers or natural fabrics? Yes, Steffi.
Ma'am, examples are like silk.
Sorry, dear.
Like silk, cotton, and all are natural fibers.
Yes.
When it comes to man-made, it is like polyester.
Yes, those are examples. I'm asking about the characteristics, the properties.
Natural fibers are obtained from the nature.
Yes.
Man-made are artificially made fabrics. Comparatively,
We talked about, yes,
natural fabrics are more expensive.
Apart from that, we discussed certain characteristics.
I was in that class, ma'am. Last class, right?
Let's just think about those fabrics. So you might have seen cotton saris or cotton kurtis. You might have seen silk saris and other silk garments, right? You might have seen jute. So talk about its appearance. So the common characteristics that comes that is applicable for all three. So when it comes to appearance, we know silk is really different from how cotton and jute might look like, right? So silk is having a lustrous or shiny appearance, whereas cotton and jute is really dull fabrics. Am I right? What about wrinkle property? What about wrinkle property? Let's just talk about natural fibers or natural fabrics like cotton, linen, jute, and silk. So these are, yes, they wrinkle easily, right? So they are not wrinkle resistant, poor wrinkle resistant. That is one property of natural fabrics and fibers. Poor wrinkle resistance. Poor wrinkle resistant. What about synthetic or man-made fibers and fabric?
They do not wrinkle easily.
Yes. Wrinkle resistance, good wrinkle resistance, right? They are wrinkle resistant. Yes. So that is one property. Another property. Why natural fibers or why natural fabrics are considered the most suitable one if the humidity is high or in summer season? Why natural fibers and fabrics are considered the most suitable one? Anna.
Resistance to heat and
it permit air circulation, right? It permit air circulation and it absorbs. It is having all natural fibers and all natural fabrics are having good moisture absorption or water absorption. Moisture absorption is really good when it comes to what? When it comes to natural fibers or natural fabric. Roshan Jain, this is +2 fashion studies class. Yes. Okay. So that is what happens. So what are the properties? The first one, wrinkle resistance. The second one is absorption, which is really poor when it comes to man-made fabrics or synthetic fabrics. Am I right? Right. Yes. These are one of the most important factors. So what is the necessity? What is the necessity of blended fabric? We have natural fabrics and natural fibers. We have man-made fabrics and man-made fibers. Then what was the need for coming up with something called blended fibers or blended fabric? What was the necessity there? What was the need? Why man created something called blended fabric? We do have natural fibers, we do have synthetic ones, and why we created blended?
Because they will have the advantage of two types
Yes,
of fabric.
both types of fabric. So when it comes to natural fibers, yes, it is having poor wrinkle resistance, but its moisture absorption is really good, right? But when it comes to synthetic fabrics or synthetic fiber, it is wrinkle resistant, but its moisture absorption is really poor. So one mark for natural fibers, one mark for synthetic fiber out of two, right? So if we take these two properties, just take these two properties. So out of two, natural fabrics or natural fibers got one mark, and synthetic fabrics or synthetic fibers got one mark. Right. So in order to combine these two qualities and to create something better, humans decided to blend natural, natural and man-made, and natural and natural. So that's how man came up with blended fabrics, which will possess the quality of both the fibers. For example, cotton and silk. Silk is a lustrous fabric, whereas cotton is a dull fabric. So mixing these two together can come up with something a little bit more shinier or lustrous than how cotton looks, right? The same goes with when polyester is blended with cotton. It will give us something called polycotton. Okay. So that's how it is. And for other characteristics like cotton or natural fibers and fabrics have poor elasticity. They have poor elasticity. Whereas they are very comfortable fabrics, breathable fabrics, which makes it really suitable to wear during summer season, which makes it really suitable for wearing while working out, while hitting gym as an active sports wear. But as as it is having poor elasticity, which makes it not suitable also, right? So man decided to blend this with stretchable fibers or synthetic fibers and decided to create something which is having the quality of cotton, whereas which is stretchable also. So that kind of fabrics, blended fabrics, are used for active sportswear and sportswear. So blended fabrics, done. Okay. Then underlying fabrics. Yes. Malavika. Not audible. Yeah, not audible, Malavika. Okay. So, Steffi,
Yes, ma'am.
underlying fabrics and its classification. What does mean by underlying fabrics? Just tell me what is underlying fabric. What does mean by underlying fabric?
It is like lining under the fabric.
No. Lining is a type of underlying fabric, but it is not just lining. So all the type of fabrics that comes under the main fabric or main textile is called underlying fabric. Okay. Or everything that comes below or beneath the main fabric. Okay, dear. Okay, it's okay. So all the fabric, all the type of fabrics that comes under the main textile, comes below the main textile, it's called, all of them are called underlying fabric. So mainly we can classify them into interfacing, interlining, and lining. Interfacing, interlining, and lining. So what is mean by lining? Which one is the lining? Anna.
Linings are used in the outer layer of
Yes, outer part, right? Which lies close to our skin or body. That is what lining is. Yes. So what is the function or purpose of interfacing, Meghna?
It is for to get the garment shape or a crisp and to support the body for
Okay.
that specific form.
Any examples?
The collar of the shirt.
Okay, collar of the shirt. So what about interlining? Interlining is used for insulation purpose, right? So which comes in between interfacing and lining, right? So that is what interlining is. Okay. Okay then. So now this is width, right? This part. Am I right? This is width. This is length. Am I right? This is length and this is width. So if this is a piece of fabric, this is where the selvage or selvages will be there on this both sides. Longitudinally, selvage will be there. Okay. Now I'm going to share the screen. Is the screen visible?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. So suppose this is a piece of fabric, just like how we said. Okay. So this is the length. And this is the width of the fabric. Now we are going to learn about grain. Okay. While developing basic bodies pattern, while developing basic skirt patterns, basic sleeve patterns and all, we talked about grain lines, right? We talked about grain lines. Different types are there. Cross grain line is there, straight grain line is there, and straight grain or lengthwise grain line is there, cross grain line is there, and bias line is there. Okay. So these things, this grain line will be marked on your pattern or sloper. It shows in which direction you are supposed to keep this pattern and in which direction the fabric is supposed to be cut. That is what this grain line denotes. Okay. So suppose this is your piece, this is your fabric, this is your length, this is your width. So lengthwise or straight grain line. Okay, lengthwise or straight grain. 1 minute. Before that, I will just show you. So this will be. So this is length, this is width, and here there will be selvage. Selvage on both the sides. Okay. Which will be 1 centimeter or half an inch with selvage, where all the warp and weft yarns will be binded together to protect it from getting raveling out. Okay. So that is what the job of a selvage. So on both sides of the longitude, both of the length sides, there will be what? Selvage. Okay, there will be selvage. So what is straight cut or lengthwise cut? The direction which lies parallel to the selvage. Okay, so if this is your pattern, if this is your pattern, suppose this is your pattern. Okay, is the screen, can you see the screen through the camera? So I will just share it again then. So it is parallel to the selvage. Okay, parallel to the selvage. So the pattern should be kept parallel to your selvage. So the direction is this. Okay, the direction is this. That is straight. Straight or lengthwise grain. Straight or lengthwise grain. Okay. If the pattern is kept like this in the width direction, if it is kept and cut in the width direction, then it is called what? Crosswise. Crosswise. Okay. And if the pattern is kept diagonally, then it is bias. Then it is called bias grain. Okay. Then it is called bias grain. These are the grain lines. These are the grain lines. Okay. So suppose this is your single darted basic bodies pattern. Okay. So this is your single darted basic bodies pattern. If the pattern is having grain line like this, if the pattern is having a grain line like this, then it is supposed to be cut in cross. Okay, it is supposed to cut in cross. Okay, it is supposed to cut in cross. Whereas if the pattern is having a grain line like this, it is supposed to cut in straight or lengthwise grain. If the pattern is having a grain line like this, we are supposed to cut the pattern or cut the fabric in bias. We're supposed to cut it in bias. Okay. So again, so suppose this is your piece of fabric. Okay. This is your piece of fabric. As we said just a few minutes before, these are the two cell wedges. Okay. Suppose these are the two cell wedges. This is the width, this is the length. And this thing that is in my hands right now, suppose this yellow paper. Okay. Consider it as our pattern. Okay. Consider it as our pattern. And this is our hem, bottom part of the pattern. And this is where shoulder line, neckline, and all is having. Okay. And this is our center front. Okay. This is our center front of the pattern. And if the pattern is showing straight grain line or lengthwise grain line, then I'm supposed to keep the center front of the pattern. You know your center front, right? So if the pattern is having a straight grain line or lengthwise grain line, then you're supposed to keep your center front parallel to your selvage. Okay. Parallel to your selvage. That is how you're supposed to keep your pattern on that particular fabric, and that's how you're supposed to cut the fabric. Okay. The center front, if the pattern is having straight or lengthwise grain line, then you're supposed to keep your center front. The pattern, the center front of your pattern should be parallel to the selvage, parallel to the selvage of your fabric. Okay. What if the pattern, if your pattern is having a cross grain line, then the center front of your pattern should be parallel to your width. So if the grain line on your pattern is cross, if your pattern is having a cross grain line, then your center front of your basic bodies or whatever pattern it is, it should be parallel to your fabric width. Okay. Is it clear? Okay. So what if your pattern is having a bias grain line? A diagonal one or a bias one. So this is your width, this is your length, selvages. So if it is having a bias grain line or diagonal grain line, then you are supposed to keep it diagonally. So this is diagonal, right? This is what diagonal means. So you are supposed to keep it diagonally. Okay. That's how you are supposed to cut it. Is it clear? Any doubts regarding grain line? Any doubts regarding grain line? Anyone? Anything? So Meghna.
Yes, ma'am.
So if the pattern, if the pattern is showing straight grain line, then how are we supposed to place it on a piece of fabric?
The pattern should be placed parallel to the selvage.
Yes, which should be parallel to the selvage?
Center front should be parallel to the selvage.
Okay, okay, good. So yes, Malaviga.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. Okay, what about bias grain line?
Center front should be kept diagonally.
Diagonally, yes. Then what about cross? Steffi.
Center front should be parallel to the width or opposite to the selvage.
Yes, it should be perpendicular, either perpendicular to the selvage or parallel to the width of the fabric, right? Yes. So now you know grain line. Am I right? Okay. While cutting a piece of fabric, how can different methods are there for cutting a piece of fabric? Okay. We can just tear it, We can just use a scissor and put a slit on the fabric and we can just easily tear it off, right? In such a way, we can cut the fabric. And in other ways that we can just take our scissors and we can just carefully cut it off. Am I right? So now we know what is grain, how we can cut the fabric. Sometimes it is not necessary that once a fabric is cut, it is really difficult if the other person or the person who used that particular piece of fabric before, if she or he didn't use it properly, then the fabric might be having off grain. Okay, off grain. So what is mean by off grain? So if this is a piece of fabric, okay, I guess this is off grain. So if this is a piece of fabric, this is the selvage. Here, proper selvage is there for this particular fabric. Okay. So while folding, just try to fold it half and just check whether all the edges, all the ends are meeting properly. And this all the ends of this particular fabric is not meeting properly. Here you can see some extra, right? Am I right? And if I turn this way also, here you can see some extra. So it's off grain. This particular fabric is off grain. The grain line is not perfect. Okay. The grain line of this particular fabric is not perfect. I hope you can see it clearly now, right? Here you can see some extra, right? But in the top region, it meets perfectly. Am I right? But here it's not. And if you turn it in the top region, it's okay only. But still some extra is there. Right. So that is what off grain is. The grain line is of this particular fabric is not perfect. It is off grain. Okay. So how can we correct it? How can we correct this particular thing? We will just watch it. Okay. We will watch a short video on it. How to correct the grain line of grain fabric. How to correct it off grain fabric. Okay. Shrinking. So the next heading that we're going to discuss is pre-shrinking. So I talked about pre-shrinking very briefly in one of the classes, one of the previous classes. I talked about pre-shrinking actually, when we talked about this underlying fabrics and all. Okay. So where I said I talked about Pakistani cotton. Do you guys remember about it? Pakistani cotton. I talked about Pakistani cotton. Remember? No. So maybe you guys are thinking about something else. Okay. So Pakistani cotton, it's really different from the cotton that we use. Okay. It kind of have a shiny surface and all. Maybe it's a blended fabric. So it is a suit material, silver suit material. So when it comes to Pakistani cotton, once it is washed, once we wash Pakistani cotton, it shrinks. Okay. Once we wash Pakistani cotton, it shrinks. So as you all know, once the fabric is woven, then it will be starched. It will be treated, right? Will be given certain finishes. It will be starched, and that's how it comes to our hands, right? And then we will purchase it. So all these finishes will be there on that particular fabric. And when it comes to fabrics like Pakistani cotton and all, it shrinks once we wash it. Okay, it shrinks really hard. It shrinks really hard. So if your size is a medium, and if you used a Pakistani cotton to switch stitch a particular kurti, and after 1 or 2 uses, of course you will wash it, right? So then it will just switch from medium to extra small. It will shrink really hard. So when the cotton is really lightweight, when it is lightweight and when it is see-through, then of course we will use lining to make our that particular kurti last long, and to make it opaque. We will use a lining beneath it, right? And we will be using the exact measurement. 2 inch or half an inch or 1 inch lesser than the length will be 1 inch lesser than our main fabric, so that the lining will not see below it, right? So like that we will be using the main fabric and lining fabric. But once the garment is stitched and once we wash the fabric, this Pakistani cotton will shrink, and however it is, the lining will see below it, because the lining will not shrink, but the main fabric shrank. So just because of that, before sewing, before stitching any particular outfit out of certain fabrics, for example, in this case, Pakistani cotton, you're supposed to wash it first. Okay. So what is this process called? Pre-shrinking. So before stitching itself, we are shrinking the fabric. Okay. So once it is shrinked, now we can just easily cut because it's already shrinked, right? Now the fabric is already shrinked. So we can just mark the measurement and we can just cut it out. So this process is called pre-shrinking. Okay. Because we know this particular fabric is going to shrink once we wash it. Okay. A lot of treatments and finishes is there on the fabric, and once we wash it, all this will be gone and the fabric and fibers will shrink. We know that. So knowing this thing, we will just pre-wash it just before stitching that particular garment. We will just pre-wash it. We will just wash it and shrink it. That is called. So washing and shrinking a piece of fabric before stitching a garment is called pre-shrinking. We are preparing ourselves for the after effects. So if you check certain garments, just like there will be wash care labels and care labels on the side seam of the garments, right? On certain garments, there will be wash care labels or care labels. It says you are not supposed to wrinkle. You're supposed to wash this particular garment in cold water, in mild hot water, room temperature water. You are not supposed to iron it. You are supposed to iron it in this much temperature. Am I right? You are not supposed to use soap, dry cleaning only. So these kind of wash care labels or care labels will be there in garments, on the side seam of the garments. Okay. So these are called care labels. Why such care labels are there? It's not because of the garment. It's because of the fabric which is used for manufacturing or constructing that particular type of garment. Okay. So all the care labels or whatever it is because of the fabric which is being used for that particular type or particular style. Okay. So some just support dry cleaning, whereas so when it comes to silk, it is not good to use soap. So dry cleaning only. Okay, it is reactive to alkalis. So we are not supposed to use soap. So it is preferred dry cleaning only. So when it comes to cotton, cotton is okay with anything. We can just use anything to wash cotton. Okay, so like that. So that is pre-shrinking. So washing and shrinking a piece of cloth before switching or manufacturing a piece of garment. That is called pre-shrinking. And we will discuss this particular topic again in the next class. So just go through it. If you have any doubt, please be ready with it. Okay. So thank you. I hope you understood.